Hello everyone and welcome to the Cuppa Chronicles. It is a different background, that is because I am currently at home on half-term holiday. So a couple of days ago I was at my mum's house sorting through my old bookshelves because obviously I've gone to uni and so there's a lot of stuff that I've left behind and haven't taken with me. And it actually brought back so many memories seeing the books that I read when I was younger, and you can definitely see the transition and the phases that I went through. And so I thought it would be quite nice for me to share with you the books that I read as a child that got me into reading and how I progressed throughout my growing up. I didn't think I'd include the children books, but I've got like the first decent length fiction books that I read by myself. First two ones that I have are my Roald Dahl books. So these were the first books that kind of got me into reading. And they're not very long. James and the Giant Peach, which is very well loved. It's actually missing the corner of it. I'm not too sure how that happened. Oh, it's got ones here. Which ones haven't you read? So the ones, and I've read all of these. So it has the BFG, Matilda, James and the Giant Peach, the Twits, George's Marvellous Medicine, The Witches. That was a particular favourite of mine, and I also remember being obsessed with the film. Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Wonderful Story of Henry Sugar, Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator, Boy, Tales of Childhood. That one is actual stories from Roald Dahl's own childhood, and I used to laugh out loud at some of the stories that he had in there. Oh, The Giraffe, the Pelly and Me as well is a really good one. Roald Dahl was such a good storyteller, and I remember loving his books. And then of course, classic, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, such a good book. I don't feel like you've had a proper childhood if you didn't grow up reading at least one Roald Dahl book. Next books that I used to read, again, a very, very popular series of books that I know a lot of people read when they were younger, but it was the Horrible Histories books. So I have here The Terrible Tudors. I mean, I loved history anyway as a child, so I always really enjoyed these books. Measly Middle Ages was a good one. Slimy Stuarts, Gorgeous Georgians, Vile Victorians. The Blitz Brits was my favourite one. Sorry, I just went to go and get a refill of tea because I'm running out. The next book I have is Chitty Bang Bang Flies Again by Frank Cottrell Boyce. It's basically a sequel to Chitty Bang Bang. When I was younger, I had two favourite films and they were Mary Poppins and Chitty Bang Bang. And so when I read this, this family buy a camper van and they redo the camper van, but they buy a new engine which actually turns out to be Chitty's engine. It then gives the car magical powers and they go and travel the world in this car. It was a really, really nice book, beautifully illustrated. This is the first page I opened it to. It's got Chitty flying through the air. It was a nice introduction from storybooks to more meaty books. Next one is a classic, and it is, this book is massive, The Chronicles of Narnia. This isn't actually my original copies. I had a box set with all of the individual books, The Magician's Nephew, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, The Horse and His Boy, Prince Caspian, The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair and The Last Battle. But I actually did a production of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe when I was 14 and I played Lucy, and so my mum got me this big book with all of them in as a gift when I did that show. My favourite book in this series was The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe. And there's one illustration that just sticks in my head. Here it is. I'll put a picture up here so you can see. It's the original illustrations from when the book was first published, and it's just so beautiful. I love snow and Christmas, and this is all about it, even though the snow is bad in Narnia. But still, it's snowy and it's wonderful, and Lucy meeting Mr. Tumnus, and it's just so nice, so nice. As I started growing up, I kind of moved away from the more fairy tale-y sort of fiction and moved to more real things that are a bit more feasible to happen in real life. So I started reading a lot of Michael Morpurgo. This is just one of his books, Alone on a Wide, Wide Sea, which was one of my favourites. I kind of went through this phase when I was younger of being fascinated with World War II, and a lot of Michael Morpurgo's books are based around war. He also did Private Peaceful and War Horse, which were also favourites of mine. Sticking on the World War II theme, this book really hit home to me. It is The Diary of Anne Frank. I actually bought this when I went to Amsterdam, because my older sister was currently working in Amsterdam. So we went for a long weekend, stayed with her, and we went to the Anne Frank Museum where her and her family hid, but the secret annex where they lived we visited, and the whole thing was completely harrowing. Even just walking on the creaky floorboards, and you realised how quiet they had to have been to not be heard, and there was just an atmosphere about the place. I bought The Diary of Anne Frank whilst I was there, and I read it within the next few days, and it's just really interesting. I was kind of at the same age that Anne was when she wrote her diary, so I connected with quite a lot of what she said, even though we both live in very different circumstances. Sticking on the subject of history, so this book I didn't read out of choice at first. It was a book that we had to study in my English classes, but I'm not afraid to admit I actually enjoyed it. I know so many people are going to be like, oh my god, I remember that book, Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. This is actually the copy that I used for my GCSEs. It's got all of my annotations in it, and also it's a book based on history, American history this time, during the Great Depression. Really interesting, really enjoyed it. Takes me back to the days of GCSEs and exams. Don't ever want to go back there again. Way too stressful. This was the first teen series that I read, besides Harry Potter. Yeah, I finished Harry Potter way before I started these. The Hunger Games trilogy. I read them over the course of one summer. I started The Hunger Games in the last few weeks of term, and then I read Catching Fire and Mockingjay both within the space of 2 weeks when I was on holiday. Catching Fire is my favourite one out of all of them. I just think that's when it gets really good. And Mockingjay is slightly different to the other two because there isn't actually a games that takes place. I thoroughly enjoyed watching the films as well. The books are obviously in a lot more detail, as with every film-book combination, but I think they still managed to do a really, really good job of the films, and Jennifer Lawrence was spot on playing Katniss. Now, this is another phase that I went through. I went through a phase of being slightly obsessed with Jack the Ripper. So this one, I loved this book. I don't even know how I came across it. I think I might have been bought it by my mum just because it says Jack the Ripper on the front. But basically, it's the first one in a series of books, and I've read the whole series. It's about an American teenager who goes to the UK to boarding school, and she can actually see ghosts, and there's a load of murders taking place, and they are all happening on the dates that the original Jack the Ripper murders took place. And basically it turns out to be the spirit of Jack the Ripper committing the murders, which is why they can't see anything on CCTV, they can't spot the murderer. I was just obsessed with this book. And the last book is when I started to get a bit more like, oh, I want lovey-dovey stories. So I've got Paper Towns by John Green. I've also read The Fault in Our Stars and Looking for Alaska and An Abundance of Catherines. Will Grayson is another one of my favourites. But this is probably my favourite one that he's done. What more can I say? Just a really, really beautiful book. It got me into more romantic-y, teenager-y stories rather than Jack the Ripper or The Hunger Games. So that is the last one. And then, of course, the biggest influence in my reading is Harry Potter. But I don't need to spend another half an hour, 5 hours telling you everything that you need to know about my addiction to Harry Potter, because you already know that, because I've already done a video on it. I need to go to bed because it is currently 2 minutes past midnight. I've been trying to film this video for probably about 3 hours and I've just kept getting distracted, so I really need to go to bed. I think at this point I'm probably getting a little bit delirious, hence the top up of tea. So I'm sorry if the end of this video is very different to the beginning, because I've kind of like lost the plot by this point. So on that note, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like and subscribe and spread the word about this channel. Bye guys.